Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Will there be a nuclear showdown in space? Yesterday, the United States and Russia clashed at the United Nations, the UN. The West claims that Russia is building nuclear weapons and they could be deployed in outer space. There is a risk of an arms race in space. Some experts think the West may be falling behind. We'll tell you why. Meanwhile, Israel seems ready to launch an offensive in Rafah. This could be the deadliest phase of the Gaza conflict yet. In Pakistan, top business owners have some advice for Prime Minister Sharma. They want him to start or restart trade with India and settle his differences with Imran Khan. Germany tried some kebab diplomacy with Turkey and it appears the move has backfired. And in a rare rebuff, India has criticized the United States for cracking down on students in university campuses. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. China summons Germany's ambassador to Beijing after Berlin arrests 4 Germans on suspicion of spying for China. Chancellor Scholz, who visited Beijing just a week ago, said the spying allegations were concerning. Beijing claims it's an attempt to quote-unquote smear and suppress China. Protests erupt in Armenia over land transfer to Azerbaijan. Protesters block roads across the country, including in the capital. It comes after Armenia agreed to return 4 villages to Azerbaijan, which Yerevan had seized more than 2 decades back. Croatia gets French fighter jets in a major arms purchase. Zagreb has received the first 6 of a dozen used Rafale jets. It's Croatia's biggest arms purchase since its war of independence in the 1990s. The deal was signed in 2021 for €1 billion. At least 155 people have died in Tanzania in torrential rains. The rains linked to the El Nino effect have led to flooding and landslides. Around 200,000 people have been affected. Neighboring Kenya is also battling flood fury. New York's highest court overturns Harvey Weinstein's sex crime conviction. The court orders a new trial. In 2020, the disgraced Hollywood producer was convicted and sentenced to 23 years in prison. And Venice begins charging day trippers for entry in a trial project. Now, visitors exploring Venice for the day will have to buy a €5 ticket. This first of its kind scheme aims to tackle mass tourism. Wars have dominated the last 2 years in geopolitics, and it's not changing anytime soon. In fact, a new conflict could be brewing, this time in outer space, where great powers of the world are locking horns. Yesterday, there was a vote at the United Nations. The US and Japan had moved a resolution. They wanted nuclear weapons to be banned in space. But Russia shot down the idea. They vetoed the resolution, and they attacked the West.
Today, our council is once again being involved in a dirty spectacle prepared by the US and Japan. This is a cynical ploy. We are being tricked.
With that statement, Russia exercised its veto power. It blocked the ban on nukes in space. Now, there are 15 members who could vote. 13 countries supported the idea. Russia opposed it and China abstained. Now, since Russia is a permanent member, its veto power killed the resolution. It did not pass. And why is this significant? Because the fallout will be far-reaching. It could trigger an arms race in space. In fact, it may have already started. Russia is thinking about putting a nuke in space. This is according to Western intelligence, so do take it with a sack of salt. They say Russia will have a nuclear weapon in space, an anti-satellite weapon. Perhaps that's why they moved the United Nations to prevent Moscow from deploying this weapon.
We are not talking about a weapon that can be used to attack human beings or cause physical destruction here on Earth. Any anti-satellite capability should be of general concern.
Satellites are the new strategic assets. From governments to people, everyone needs satellites. Governments rely on them to secure communications. Militaries need them for intelligence gathering, and we need them for all our modern gadgets. From our phone calls to GPS services, satellites enable all kinds of activity and connectivity. A crippling blow can knock out all of this. And that's the capability Russia is said to be chasing. But how will this weapon be different from the ones that already exist? 4 countries already have anti-satellite weapons. Russia, the United States, China, and India. They already have anti-satellite weapons. So how will a nuclear version be different? The current ones can only strike one satellite at a time. A nuclear weapon can strike multiple satellites at once. And such an attack would be crippling. An entire communication network can be taken out with a single strike, and the US is convinced that Russia is pursuing this nuclear weapon.
President Putin himself has said publicly that Russia has no intention of deploying nuclear weapons in space. Why, if you are following the rules, would you not support a resolution that reaffirms them? What could you possibly be hiding?
What is she referring to? A statement by President Vladimir Putin. He spoke about this in February. The Russian president rubbished Western claims. He said Moscow has no plans to launch nukes in space.
We have always been categorically opposed to putting nuclear weapons in space, and we continue to do so.
Has Putin changed his mind now? Russia says it maintains the same position. It wants no weapons of any kind in space. How about striking targets in space from the Earth? Well, that cannot be ruled out. In 2022, Russia launched a cyber attack. It targeted Ukraine. This was just before Russian forces attacked Kiev. Their hackers were successful. They took out thousands of internet modems. What if Ukraine's military was on target instead? Imagine a scenario where a Ukrainian soldier is guarding a post on the border. Now, these soldiers see Russian soldiers approaching. They need reinforcements. So they pick up their satellite phones to call their base, but the phones don't work. No connectivity, no network, because military satellites have been attacked. Do you know what that means? Ukrainian soldiers become sitting ducks. And while this scenario, this story is hypothetical, it is also a very real possibility. Russia is testing warfare tools designed to sabotage the Starlink satellites. This is a satellite-based internet service, Starlink. Elon Musk is the brain behind it. Ukraine's forces rely on Starlink for battleground communications. So space warfare is now a reality. It's already here. Countries like Russia are pursuing not just a single weapon, but a range of capabilities, from cyber attacks to anti-satellite weapons, and now perhaps nuclear weapons in space. This is the beginning of a new arms race. Let's turn to Gaza now. Israel is ready for the next stage of its war there, and possibly the deadliest stage, an assault on Rafah. All the indications are there. Benjamin Netanyahu's spokesperson says the invasion is moving ahead. Israel's army is planning to deploy 2 reserve brigades in Gaza, sort of like a backup. We're talking about 6,000 to 10,000 soldiers. They've also set up tents near Rafah. The plan is to evacuate refugees from the city, put them in these tents, and then begin the assault. Now take a look at these pictures. They cover places near Khan Yunis and Rafah. The first picture is from April 7th. The second picture is from April 23rd. Now look at all the new tents that have been pitched. The idea is to put up refugees in these tents, but even then, it would be a deadly operation. Let's pull up the map now. Rafah is located in southern Gaza. More than 1 million people live there. Most of them are refugees. And if Israel attacks, they have nowhere to go. To the north is Israel's army. To the south is Egypt. So many experts worry that the invasion could be a bloodbath, which is why everyone opposes it. The US has refused to support this operation, but they seem helpless to stop it.
The President has spoken to it, and we've had very detailed discussions with the Israelis as recently as last week by secure video to talk through not just our concerns, but our view that there is a different way to go about dealing with the Hamas threat in Rafah and succeeding in ensuring the long-term defense and security of Israel.
Egypt has a lot at stake here. If fighting breaks out, Gazans will flee south, and south of Rafah is Egypt. So Cairo is worried about a spillover, and they have warned Israel against attacking Rafah, even hinted at suspending their peace deal. And this is very important. Israel and Egypt signed a treaty back in 1979, And Egypt became the first Arab nation to recognize Israel, 1979. It also agreed to demilitarize the Sinai Peninsula. And this was a big deal for Israel. Since Sinai had no soldiers, Israel could focus elsewhere, like on the Hezbollah in the north, or the West Bank, or on Iran, because they knew that their southern flank was safe. But now Egypt is having second thoughts. Some officials say Cairo could suspend the peace agreement, meaning Egypt could remilitarize Sinai, and Israel is worried about this. Reports say top Israeli officials visited Cairo on Wednesday. They discussed the Rafah plan with Egypt. Apparently, the invasion will be slow and gradual. Israel may not go in all guns blazing. Instead, they will go neighborhood by neighborhood. But remember, we're talking about war here. Even the best of plans may not work out. So Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is taking a big risk. The US does not want him to invade. Egypt does not want him to invade. Yet he is going ahead. The question is why? Israel says Rafah is home to 6 Hamas battalions. That's 6,000 fighters. So Netanyahu says we have to enter Rafah. We have to defeat these Hamas fighters. If not, Hamas will regroup. Well, that's the military argument. The political argument is to stay in power. Israel's so-called slow invasion could take months. First, you have to set up refugee camps, then you have to evacuate people, and finally you have to move in. And all of this could take a long time. Which also means that Netanyahu will not have to step down. It means more pain for people in Rafah. On Wednesday night, there was another airstrike. It killed 6 people and injured several more.
Look at what the Israelis did to us. They destroyed our homes, they destroyed us. We can't get out. They say they want to enter Rafah. Where do they want to take us? Where?
These airstrikes are like warning shots. Israel is basically telling the people it's time to leave. Leave the city before the assault begins. But evacuations will not prevent bloodshed. If Israel is right, there are 6,000 Hamas fighters in Rafah. They will not surrender without a fight. And who will be caught in the middle? The people, the refugees in Rafah. So the military consequences would be huge. And the political ones could be even bigger. If there is a massacre in Rafah, global sentiment will harden, the kid gloves may disappear, even countries on the fence may criticize Israel. Plus, it could endanger years of diplomatic hard work. The peace deal between Israel and Egypt has survived a lot. 2 intifadas, wars with Lebanon, and the Arab Spring. They survived all of it, but Netanyahu's Rafah invasion could unravel it. And with it, hopes of Arab-Israeli peace. Speaking of hope, it's a rare commodity in Pakistan. Their economy is reaching new lows, their politics is broken, and terror groups are running riot. The man tasked with fixing all of this is Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. Of course, he can't do it all alone. He will need some help. So Sharif decided to visit the city of Karachi. Karachi is the business capital of Pakistan. It is home to the country's richest people. Prime Minister Sharif held a meeting with Karachi's business community. He invited suggestions from them. Look at what happened next.
एक जो है हमारे पड़ोसियों से हाथ मिलाएं जो आप काम कर रहे हैं इसके ऊपर आई थिंक उसके भी जो है वो बहुत अच्छे नतीजे आएंगे इंक्लूडिंग इंडिया मैं समझता हूँ और आप ये कर सकते हैं कि इंडिया के साथ भी जो है मामलात को ठीक करते हैं दूसरा जो अडयाला के बासी हैं उनके साथ भी आप हाथ मिलाएं वहाँ भी मामलात को जो है वो बेहतर करने और वो आप कर सकते हैं.
That was Arif Habib. He heads Pakistan's largest securities and investment firm, and he had 2 suggestions for Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. A, restart trade with India, and B, bury your differences with Imran Khan. And both of them make sense. But will Sharif actually do it? Can he do it? Well, Karachi's business community is quite powerful. This city is Pakistan's growth engine. It makes up 20% of the national GDP, 50% of the total government revenue, and 47%, one city, 47% of direct tax revenue. So Karachi has a lot of clout. But right now, the business leaders are worried. Cost of raw materials is up, fuel and gas prices are up. So Pakistani products are losing competitiveness. They cannot keep up in the global market, which brings us to their suggestion. First is restarting trade with India. Bilateral trade was stopped by Islamabad in 2019. India had revoked Jammu and Kashmir's statehood. So in response, Pakistan suspended trade. Today, there is no formal trade between India and Pakistan, but recently there has been a rethink. Last month, Pakistan's foreign minister addressed the issue. He said Islamabad should seriously examine or would seriously examine restarting trade. And what did India say? Well, nothing on trade. But in the past, India's position has been quite clear. Terrorism cannot be overlooked. And there are again two factors to note here. One, Pakistan's government is under a lot of pressure. Shehbaz Sharif talks about doubling exports. Well, the world's largest market is right next door, yet Pakistan is not accessing it. And that is why the business community is upset. Factor number two, India has leverage in this equation. Pakistan's economy is only 1/10 of India's, 1/10. It will grow with or without Pakistan. India will continue to grow, but restarting trade benefits Pakistan more than India. The question is, does the army also want it? And honestly, no one knows. Army Chief Asim Munir is busy with domestic politics. First, he toppled Imran Khan, then he repelled nationwide protests, and finally, he rigged an election. So he's not really had the time to talk about India. The Sharifs have traditionally advocated for closer relations, but no one knows where the general stands. Hence the confusion. And don't expect this to change, because Pakistan's domestic problems are not going anywhere. Right now, they're negotiating a new loan. From whom? Islamabad's favorite banker, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. This loan could be a long-term one. Reports say Pakistan is asking for $8 billion. They're hoping for a deal by July. So the economy is still a work in progress. Same with internal security. The Tehreek-e-Taliban is on a rampage. They're attacking security sites across Pakistan. In fact, the Taliban may have cost Pakistan more than India. And we are not saying this. Pakistan's own diplomat is. Listen to this.
Afghanistan has become a permanent fixture in Pakistan's regional paradigm for over 4 decades. In terms of blood and treasure, Pakistan has suffered more due to the Afghanistan imbroglio than its 3 wars with India.
Pakistan has fought 3 wars with India. Yet the ambassador says Taliban has cost them more. It tells you what the thinking is. The new Taliban regime in Afghanistan has not helped at all. Pakistan thought that they had an ally in Kabul, but the truth is far from it. The TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, has used Afghan soil to bleed Pakistan. Attacks have increased 65% since the Taliban's takeover. Suicide attacks are up 500%. So Islamabad finds itself in a bind. If you want growth, you must make peace with your neighbors. If you want peace with your neighbors, your internal politics must be stable. If you want stable politics, you need growth and prosperity. Do you see the problem here? That's why the advice from Karachi's businessmen makes sense. To escape this tough spot, Pakistan will have to rebuild burnt bridges with India, with Imran Khan, and with the region. Our next story is from Turkey. The country recently welcomed a guest, German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier. And Steinmeier did not go there empty-handed. He brought an interesting gift along, an entire kebab skewer. That's right, Germany's president thought it was appropriate to bring kebabs to Turkey. The headlines are calling it doner diplomacy or kebab diplomacy. Others are calling it cringe. Before we get into that, let's look at what exactly happened here. Steinmeier is the president of Germany. He's a ceremonial figurehead. The real power is held by Germany's chancellor, and that is Olaf Scholz. So what was Steinmeier doing in Turkey? Apparently trying to help thaw frosty ties. Well, someone should have told him that a nice warm kebab solves a lot of things, but not diplomatic tensions. Germany and Turkey have been at odds lately. A major reason is Turkey's president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Erdogan has made a lot of enemies over the years, often out of allies. Allies like the other NATO members. Erdogan annoyed them. He annoyed NATO members by holding up Sweden's membership. He was holding the membership hostage for months so that he could get weapons from the West, and they eventually caved to his demands, but the West is still angry with Erdogan. The already strained relationship hit a new low last October after Israel attacked, the Israel-Hamas war began. Most of the West supports Israel. Germany does too. But Erdogan publicly supports the Palestinians. So the last 6 months have been tense.
Of course, there's a painful image we are seeing there that involves children, women, and elderly people. Our German friends should also see this. Gaza, Palestine, has been completely razed to the ground. Everything is destroyed.
We talked about our differences, but above all, we reaffirmed our common goals. And that is important to me. We want to and must improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza.
Steinmeier went to Turkey to diffuse tensions with a giant helping of kebabs. Apparently, that doesn't seem to have worked. Of course, Erdogan could be upset for a different reason altogether. Before Steinmeier brought out the kebabs, he had already made a gaffe. He landed in the city of Istanbul. He did not go straight to the capital Ankara to meet President Erdogan. Instead, the German leader met Istanbul's mayor. He's an opposition leader who's expected to fight Erdogan in the future. And to add to the diplomatic faux pas, Steinmeier brought out his kebab knife. A lot of people were appalled at this stunt, especially Turkish people who live in Germany. They think Steinmeier was perpetuating a racist stereotype. You see, Germany is home to about 3 million people of Turkish heritage, the largest Turkish diaspora community. Many Turks have been living in Germany for generations. They went there in the 1960s under the guest worker programs. The Turks helped rebuild Germany after the Second World War. Many of them chose to settle in the country, and when they did, they brought with them Turkish culture and cuisine, including the famous doner kebab. Over the years, the kebab has become one of Germany's most popular foods. Annual sales are valued at 7 billion euros. That's about $7.5 billion. So the doner kebabs are extremely popular, and they have a special place in Germany, like chicken tikka masala does in the UK. It's a dish brought by immigrants and eventually loved by all. So considering all of this, the German president's stunt should have worked. If not with Erdogan, then at least with the people. After all, it was a display of cultural integration. The Turks are definitely proud of their kebabs. They're currently petitioning for protected status. They want the word doner to be restricted. So only those who make kebabs via the Turkish method can use it. If this is the case, where did Steinmeier go wrong? Why did his doner diplomacy flop? Well, think about it. Would you take pasta to Italy, cheeseburgers to the US? How would Indians like if a British Prime Minister brought chicken tikka masala, even if it were Rishi Sunak bringing it? The point is, it's weird. And sometimes it seems like a stereotype, reducing India's contribution to chicken tikka masala or Turkey's to kebabs. The German leader's intentions may have been good, but unlike the kebabs, the gimmick was in poor taste. Now let's turn to the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC. It's a country in Central Africa, one of the largest on the continent and home to over 100 million people. The DRC has issued a notice to the world's second largest company, Apple, the makers of the iPhone. The DRC has accused Apple of using quote-unquote blood minerals, minerals taken from conflict zones in the country. Now, the Democratic Republic of Congo wants Apple to stop. It has issued a formal cease and desist order. If Apple does not comply, it will face legal action. Now, first, let's look at what these blood minerals are and why they call that. The DR Congo is rich in certain minerals, metal deposits that are used to make electronic devices like the iPhone. 3 minerals found in the DRC go into making phones: tantalum, tin, and tungsten. Together, they are referred to as 3T. Now, these 3 minerals are found in the ground. They are mined, purified, and then transformed into phone parts. The Democratic Republic of Congo has all 3 in abundant quantities, making it an important country in electronic supply chains. But there's a problem: the blood part in blood minerals. The minerals are not in some safe area to be picked up at one's leisure. No, the minerals are mostly found in the eastern DRC, in provinces that have been embroiled in conflict for years. This is the region in question. The north and south Kivu provinces. This area is full of different armed groups. Some are terrorist outfits, like the local branch of the Islamic State. Then you have various militias. Some support the DRC government, others are backed by foreign powers. One prominent force is called the M23 group. They control vast swathes of land. They've been fighting against the Congolese government for years and they're backed by Rwanda. Yes, that Rwanda of genocide and British deportation fame.
This situation has exacted a high human price, 15 million deaths, and it is the work of a neighboring country, Rwanda, whose intoxicating obsession with the abundant strategic resources lying beneath the soil of my country have led it to lose all sense of reason. This neighboring country is persisting and continuing its criminal enterprise to procure colossal economic benefits.
Rwanda backs an armed militia in the DRC. The M23 group takes over mineral-rich territory, forces locals, adults and children to mine these minerals and sends them across the border, letting Rwanda profit from the DRC's minerals. And the M23 are not the only ones doing this. Most of the armed groups have their own fiefdoms. They have carved out their own territory. They rule with an iron fist and force the local people to work in the mines, the 3T mines and others. That is why the DRC has called them blood minerals. Congolese blood is shed when they are extracted. The DRC says companies like Apple are complicit in all of this. And Apple, of course, is not the only one. Intel, HP, even Tesla. All these brands have been accused of using blood minerals. It's a charge that Apple and the others often deny, even though investigations over the years have proved this link. There are a number of studies about this, but the companies keep denying the reports. For proof, they point to a monitoring agency. The agency is run by rich white Europeans. It is incentivized to clear as many minerals as possible, and it is self-monitored. But despite these obvious red flags, companies like Apple use these agencies to get a clean chit. That is how your Western companies keep denying responsibility with the help of compromised monitoring agencies. After choosing to ignore the blood on their supplies, the same companies make all those sleek, fancy ads about a green future, inclusivity, diversity, or some of these other things to appeal to Gen Z. Talk about hypocrisy. Apple might be guilty of all this too, but the DRC will have to prove it. The country will be up against one of the biggest companies in the world, so we wish the Congolese the best of luck. To Paris now, which is hosting the Olympics this year. This summer, millions of people will descend upon Paris. Athletes, spectators, world leaders, a total of 13 million visitors are expected to be in the French capital in less than 100 days. But is the city prepared for all of this? Chances are it's not. Hosting the Games is a security nightmare, and France already has a history of terror attacks. Paris says it's prepared for anything and everything, but security services do not seem so confident. They even want to move the opening ceremony from the banks of the Seine to a closed stadium. Our next report tells you why.
Every year, millions of people flock to Paris to see the Eiffel Tower. But ask any Parisian, and they believe the real star of the city is the Seine, a river sneaking through its heart. From wars to revolutions, from paintings to books, the Seine has long defined Paris, which is why it's set to play a starring role in this summer's Paris Olympics. The banks were supposed to host the opening ceremony of the Games. The French president promised it himself. But with just 100 days to go, it looks like the plan may not work. Why? Because it could be a security nightmare for Paris. Even Macron has changed his tone now. He promised the world the banks of the Seine, but now he says it could be a more conventional venue like the Stade de France. Why is that? Because securing a stadium is easier than securing an open venue. This is the biggest sporting event in the world. 13 million people will descend upon the city. It's already a logistical nightmare. France has cut the number of attendees for the ceremony, and now they want to change the venue. France is no stranger to terror attacks. There was the Charlie Hebdo shooting, the Bataclan massacre, the deadly Bastille Day attack. So the threat looms large. And since the ISIS attack in Moscow, France is even more worried. It has raised the national security alert system to its maximum level. There's a dedicated Olympic intelligence service to collect all information on terror threats. Since February, there have been 3 incidents of laptops being stolen. One even contained the security plans for the games. Then there are reports of flaws in the anti-drone shield. The French capital is using drones to protect itself from a terror attack. It's meant to detect, identify, and neutralize threats. But sources reveal that it isn't all that effective. Recent tests have exposed some worrying flaws in the system. So there have already been a series of setbacks for Paris, but the opening ceremony is only the beginning of its problems. An event this big needs mammoth security apparatus. Anti-drone detection technology, crowd control measures. France was warned about all of this. But reports say Paris chose to ignore them and now is paying the price. Right now, security responsibilities have been split. It will be between state and private enterprises. There's a total of 22,000 private security agents, plus 45,000 military and police forces. The cost was expected to be less than 3 billion euros, but chances are it could be close to 5 billion euros. Paris says it's thwarting terror attacks every day. And the Macron government remains confident that it can avert the Olympics from turning into a terror nightmare.
Moving on to Spain, where the Prime Minister is on a break. Pedro Sanchez has suspended all public duties. He will not be in office this week, not because he is on a holiday, but because Sanchez says it's time to quote-unquote stop and reflect. He has a big question on his mind. Should he resign or stay on? And why does he face this question? Because of a bribery scandal in which he is not even directly involved. It's about his wife, Begoña Gómez. She has been implicated. The court has opened an inquiry into her. The case has been filed by a group called Manos Limpias, meaning clean hands. It describes itself as a trade union, but they're essentially a group of anti-corruption campaigners. And they've had high-profile targets in the past, politicians, bankers, even Spanish royalty for that matter. And this time they've accused the Prime Minister's wife. They say she misused her position, that she used government connections for her own business interests. The court has not given any details, but reports say this involves a company called Globelia. It's a Spanish tourism group. They own an airline, the Air Europa. In 2020, the Prime Minister's wife met this company's CEO twice, and the timing was suspicious because the group was also in talks with the government. What for? A huge COVID bailout for its struggling airline. At that time, Gómez, the Prime Minister's wife, ran a foundation. So here's the charge against her. She got money for her foundation in exchange for a government bailout. Now, of course, these are all reports. Gómez has denied them. So has the foundation that she worked for. And the company Globelia, they say they're victims of political crossfire. Now, the matter is in court, but the Prime Minister is not waiting for a verdict. He has published a 4-page letter on X. He says he's not attached to his position. And he also asks if it's worth, amid all this mudslinging, is it worth it? The Spanish opposition calls it a show. But the entire scandal has raised one issue, the issue of accountability. It is so rare in politics. Pedro Sanchez may be doing it for show, but at least he stepped back from his duties. Compare that to the South Korean president, for instance. His wife was accused of taking a bribe, a Dior bag worth $2,200, and it was on camera. The scandal rocked South Korean politics, but the president stayed put. His ratings dropped to an all-time low. His wife disappeared from public view, but quitting the job was never even brought up. In fact, leaders rarely quit due to corruption until and unless they're forced to do so. And there are many such examples. Benjamin Netanyahu, the current Prime Minister of Israel, he's on trial for fraud and corruption. Donald Trump, the former President of the United States, on trial for hush money payment. Jacques Chirac and Nicolas Sarkozy, two former French presidents, both accused of corruption. Brazilian President Lula da Silva was once convicted of corruption. In South Africa, Jacob Zuma was charged with it. Indonesia's former leader Suharto siphoned off billions. In India, there is no dearth of such cases. Leaders implicated in bribery cases, leaders jailed for corruption, yet very few convictions. They leave office only when the law kicks them out. In most cases, they avoid punishment. In 2013, the Supreme Court of India passed an order. It said convicted and jailed leaders will be barred from office for 6 years. But leaders with corruption charges are still in politics. Many of them have exploited legal loopholes. And this is across parties. I guess we as voters have come to accept it, which is why this story from Spain stands out. Having said that, corruption is neither new nor unique to any country, and we all pay the price for it. The cost of global corruption is said to be $2.6 trillion, which is 5% of the world's GDP. Here's what a survey says. Across the world, 1 in 4 people pay bribes. 57% believe their government is not fighting corruption. Another study says 1 in 3 people believe their leaders are corrupt. It shows you the lack of trust in political leadership. The Spanish Prime Minister may be doing it for perception, but even that seems like a virtuous move, given the abysmally low standards and rare accountability in politics. Have you played Uno? If you have, you must know the Uno reverse. It's a special card in the deck. It basically changes the direction of play. If you're playing clockwise, it will become counterclockwise, hence the reverse. Well, India has just played a diplomatic Uno reverse, and quite a rare one too. You may have seen the pictures from American colleges. A lot of them have become protest sites. Thousands of students are rallying for Gaza. They're accusing their government of supporting a genocide. And what's been the government's response? A crackdown. Hundreds of protesting students in America have been arrested, sometimes quite violently. Take a look at this. All of this was happening in the United States of America. Now, normally India would not react to something like this. We do not sanction countries, we do not comment on internal matters, and we certainly do not advise. But this time, India has broken that policy. The Ministry of External Affairs has reacted to the college protests. It had some advice for the White House. Listen to this.
In every democracy, there has to be the right balance between freedom of expression, sense of responsibility and public safety and order. Democracies in particular should display this understanding in regard to other fellow democracies. After all, we are all judged by what we do at home and not what we say abroad.
Those last lines are very significant. Let me repeat that for you. Democracy should display understanding in regard to other democracies. After all, we are judged by what we do at home and not what we say abroad. There's no room for doubt there. India is clearly talking about the United States of America. Who else lectures abroad and cracks down at home? But notice the language. New Delhi has not criticized America's handling of the issue, nor has it expressed concern. Instead, India has served a reminder to Washington. We understand the need for public order. Hope you understand the same in India. And this is a significant policy change for New Delhi, sort of like a tit for tat. You comment on our domestic matters, so we are commenting on yours. It doesn't weaken or change the bilateral relationship, but it does send a message. Just think back to 2020, the US was gripped by the Black Lives Matter movement. An unarmed black man had been killed by police officers in America. There were protests and there were riots in American cities. But New Delhi said nothing. You had comments from European capitals, comments from China, but nothing from India. Same when the US Supreme Court cancelled abortion rights. Criticism came from around the world, but India said nothing because that was New Delhi style. Do not make unsolicited comments, only react when India is targeted or defamed. Like when US reports questioned freedoms in India, or when rights agencies talked about Indian secularism, then India would hit back. But this one is different. These college protests have nothing to do with India. The students are calling out President Joe Biden, the US president. They do not have any beef with India. Yet the ministry has reacted. The question is this the new official policy? Will we also see comments on other issues, like the condition of migrants in Europe, or the crackdown in Hong Kong, or the genocide in Xinjiang? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But one thing is quite clear, India's tone has become harsher. And this change can be seen right at the top. From Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar, he recently talked about the Western coverage of Indian elections. This is what he said.
Yes, I get a lot of these noises from the Western press. And if they criticize our democracy, it's not because they lack information. It is because they think they're also political players in our election. That is the reason. You know, I read an article today where some Western media said, you know, it is so hot in India. Why are they holding elections at this time? Now, I read that article and I wanted to say, listen, in that heat, my lowest turnout is higher than your highest turnout in the best weather.
Again, notice his tone. The idea here is not to antagonize others. The idea is to make them understand. Unsolicited comments are not welcome. Just look at all the times America has commented on India's issues, the farmers' protest, the new Citizenship Act, and of course, the general commentary on human rights. The US never tried to understand the nuances. They saw, they reacted. But now Washington has got a taste of its own medicine. Let's see how they respond to it. She's been idolized by art lovers, targeted by thieves, and preyed on by food attackers. I'm talking about Mona Lisa, the 16th century painting by Leonardo da Vinci. It is one of the most renowned works of art in the history of the world. Mona Lisa is held at the Louvre in Paris. It receives 10 million admirers every year, which is quite the crowd. So visitors barely get the time to view the painting, just about 50 seconds on average. And many call it an underwhelming experience. Now, the Louvre has empathized and it plans to move Mona Lisa to the basement. Our next report tells you why.
Every day, tens of thousands of people from around the world visit the Louvre Museum in Paris. They pay a $23 entrance fee, walk straight past countless masterpieces and into a beige room just to view one painting, Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. But many people are only able to catch a fleeting glimpse of it. Mona Lisa is one of the world's most famous paintings, if not the most famous. So it attracts huge crowds, and there's limited space in the gallery. To give you an idea, on some days, about 25,000 people queue up to admire the painting. But on any given day, each visitor gets an average viewing time of 50 seconds. That is, if they're lucky. That's barely any time to figure out why this 520-year-old painting is supposed to be so special. Understandably, this has frustrated people, quite like the last French queen, Marie Antoinette, who found Mona Lisa too small, too dark. Many have crowned Mona Lisa the world's most disappointing masterpiece. There are more than 18,000 reviews of the painting online, and about 37% are negative. The Louvre understands this sentiment. They say, visitors are not being properly received in the current room, so we feel that we're not doing our job properly. So they have proposed a new plan. They want to place the Mona Lisa in a dedicated space reserved just for the painting. And the goal is to kill two birds with one stone. For starters, the painting will be slightly out of the way. It will get its own entrance, so there will be less congestion elsewhere. Secondly, the Mona Lisa has starved its neighbors of attention, so when it moves to a different spot, other artworks may be able to shine. According to the museum's director, moving Mona Lisa to a separate room could end the public's disappointment. This sounds like a good plan, but this initiative will require quite the renovation. The Louvre will need a new entrance and 2 new rooms in the basement. This will cost roughly $534 million. This won't be particularly appeasing to the French government, which is planning to slash its culture budget. But the Louvre is undeterred. After all, the Mona Lisa is the most visited work of art in the world, with up to 10 million admirers per year. The painting is the main draw for the museum. It contributes to 80% of the museum's annual visitors. Plus, Mona Lisa may have been created in the 16th century, but it's still idolized by art lovers. It continues to perplex scientists who can't figure out whether she's smiling or not. Mona Lisa is at the forefront of pop culture as well, from books to movies. It has found a newfound fan in artificial intelligence. It has gained the attention of a man who disguised himself as an elderly woman in a wheelchair just to throw cake in her face. The painting has even been targeted by soup throwers, thieves and moustache painters. So the Mona Lisa evokes a lot of sentiments, but the Louvre hopes public disappointment is no longer one of them.
Our next story comes from Australia, specifically its western coast, where 160 whales beached themselves this morning, meaning they stranded themselves on beaches. It's a phenomenon called beaching. So 160 whales beached themselves. A dramatic rescue operation followed, but it was only partially successful. 130 whales were returned to the sea. The others died. It was an overwhelming sight. Why did the whales beach themselves? And how common is this phenomenon? Our next report tells you.
This morning, Dunsborough woke up to this sight. This is a coastal town in Australia. 160 whales had beached themselves along its coast, meaning they stranded themselves on the beach. These are long-finned pilot whales. They were closely packed, spread across about 500 meters. And it was worrying, to say the least. According to marine scientists, the survival rate for beached whales is low. These animals can only survive for around 6 hours on land. After that, their health begins to deteriorate and they die. Which is what happened to several stranded whales today. Rescue teams rushed to the beach. So did wildlife officials, veterinarians, and hundreds of volunteers. But by the time they arrived, 26 whales had already died.
It's quite important that we remove the dead whales from the water. So that's what you can see. We tried to get them up out of the water line to stop encouraging the other whales that were in the water to re-strand or to strand back again.
The rescuers tended to the whales. In total, they were able to save 130 lives. So most of the whales were returned to the sea. And the dramatic operation was a partial success. Now, the whales can beach themselves again, so rescue teams have come up with a prevention plan.
So we've got vessels out on the water, and we've also got spotter plane up in the air that's doing searches over every couple of hours just to see where they are. And so far so good. They haven't made it back to shore, but we will keep monitoring them.
This is good news, but coming to the big question, why did the whales beach themselves? Whales aren't the only ones that beach themselves. So do dolphins. There are around 2,000 strandings each year worldwide. Most of them result in the animals dying. But no one is sure why this phenomenon occurs.
No one knows what's going on, why this happens, but yeah, it's pretty sad.
But there are some theories.
There's a variety of reasons, particularly with this species, the long-fin pilot whales. So sometimes it might be a member of the pod is ill and the others follow. Sometimes it might be some kind of noise disturbance. Disease can be a factor.
Whales are highly sociable animals. So if one member falls sick, is injured or under threat, other whales follow them to the shore. But so far, this is only a theory. Science does not have any concrete evidence yet. But for the sake of these marine mammals, hopefully we get the answers soon.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg took to the skies in a Eurofighter jet. Engineers have developed a new robot capable of mimicking human facial expressions. And a Japanese Olympic champion has set a new world record for ski jump in Iceland. Finally, taking you back in history, on this day in 1859, construction began on the Suez Canal. It was completed 10 years later. It connected the Mediterranean and the Red Seas, becoming the shortest sea route between Europe and Asia. Today, the Suez Canal is one of the world's most heavily used shipping routes. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.